And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put together two strengths, two abilities in man, and they are desire, shahwat, and anger, ghadab. These two strengths are like his personal qualities that are always with him, and through them he is tested. And so by them the servant reaches the high levels of the righteous and the abrar, and yet by them he can also fall beneath the feet of the wicked, the lowest of the low, as the asfal as-safilin. So the first type of person will ascend by his own shahwat and ghadab, with his own desires and anger, through the way he uses it, to the highest rank, and that is paradise, Jannah. And the second type of person will fall to the lowest level, and that is hell, Jahanam, due to the way he uses the shahwat and ghadab, this quality of desire and anger. As both of these traits are referred to as quwwat by the scholars, as strengths, and both are always intrinsically with you. Two immense, powerful emotions that you can incline towards, and it can cause you to do something that you didn't think you could. And hence both these are powerful emotions, and they become a source of azmaish, a test, where either one reaches the level of abrar, the pious, that of a neck, righteous status, or of the level of the wicked and evil ones, the ones of shar. Hence both these strengths require channelizing. So whoever's shahwat desires are involved in attaining Darul Naim, Jannah, as their home of blessings, and whose ghadab, anger, is used in this dunya to defend the prophets and the deen of Allah and to spread the good word and the truth, then both their shahwat and ghadab are being utilized in the way of Allah and are channelized well. But whoever's shahwat is quick in attaining only self-pleasure and self-desires, and his ghadab, his anger, is limited to taking revenge for what which happened just to himself, his haqq, his rights, his status, his self and self-ego, then he has wasted these strengths and potential and falls prey to doing injustices and sins. And with this person sees the commands of Allah not followed in his home and environment, and he witnesses the breaking of Allah's laws all around him, or within himself, or within his gatherings, but he does nothing about it. He doesn't spread goodness and prevent the evil. Then scholars say that he has used these quwwats, these strengths, against the pleasure of Allah. And rather than harnessing these two strengths, he fell prey to being the servants of them. His shahwat and ghadab, and thus he wastes his inner potential in anger, scheming, plotting, and fueling his desire for revenge, hatred. And all this is all for his nafs, for his ego, wasting his talents, his time, his abilities, and standing as an enemy to himself, and more than the enemy outside of himself, as an enemy from within himself, unleashing his anger and desires with no control. And that is what eventually damages him the most. This person then starts to ignore the strong voice of awareness and conscience of fitrah inside of him, weakening its voice or even silencing it, and navigates himself away from reevaluating himself. And this reevaluation requires the skill to detach yourself from yourself, and to then analyze yourself as a person and be willing to take that critique. And for this, the knowledge of deen gives you another vision, a deeper vision. It lets you stop, think and ponder, contemplate and reassess things. It helps you to think independently with a self-awareness and an ability to question oneself. And it lets that light, divine guidance, highlight for us our own flaws and ask ourselves the question that, am I actually a good person? Do I get angry for my haqq, my rights, or for the haqq of others, and for the haqq of the deen primarily? This is a huge and amazing litmus test to see where you employ these two inner strengths of shahwat and ghadab. A litmus test of your level of iman, of your level of takabbur, of arrogance and selfishness, and a litmus test of your level of sincerity to your Rabb, the one that created you in the first place and gave you all these inner strengths and faculties to utilize with responsibility in the first place. In fact, your level of ma'rifat, of recognition of Allah and of His Rasools, His prophets, His books, His deen, His angels, and your ma'rifat, understanding and recognition of the akhirah, of the afterlife, of hell as your final home, or heaven as your final home, will in fact govern how you use these two intense quwwats of ghadab and shahwat for yourself and your self-growth. And so for this, correct knowledge, ilm, is essential. It will determine whether you can control the shahwat, the desires of your eyes, in what you see in public or in the privacy of your room, and your tongue in what you talk about and say to those around you and what you encourage them to, and of your shahwat, the desires of your limbs, with respect to what you use them for, what sort of activities are they indulged in. And it'll determine your level of control of your anger. anger management, of your ghadab. How much of it is unleashed when you are personally hurt, with regards to how much is unleashed when you see injustices, and when you see poverty and hunger around you, and when you see the weak and the elderly not given help or respect, and when you see the deen being compromised or offended, even within your own self or home or environment or gathering. That is when one's shahwat and ghadab, desires and anger, will take him to piety and righteousness, and towards being a beautiful person, inwardly and outwardly, and towards the love and rahmah of Allah, the assistance of angels, and the du'as of the other makhluk, of the other creatures around him. So through these desires, man can incline towards the bliss that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for him in the final abode of blessings, and that is Jannah. Because man is born with desires, and it is not remotely possible for him to fulfill all of his desires in this dunya. And when he becomes aware of this, then the whims and wishes of this world, this dunya, do not overpower him. In fact, he finds contentment in what he has, and finds the things of this world burdensome, and would rather simplify his load in his life. As he's decided to walk and then to start running on his journey to Jannah, to heaven, and so he needs a lighter load to move faster, more swiftly, and only carry a necessary amount of load to carry on his journey. And this person has managed to streamline his life by controlling these two strengths and emotions of shahwat and ghadab, desires and anger, and has worked to rise above the petty things of this world. Because now, this person has a great concern, a greater worry, as this person is more concerned about the levels of his own iman, his own faith, the rights of others, all for the sake of the love of God, the love of Allah, and hence for uplifting of the deen and the attainment of Jannah, of paradise. In a hadith, Abu Umama reported that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, "Whoever loves for the sake of Allah, hates for the sake of Allah, gives for the sake of Allah, and withholds for the sake of Allah, has perfected the faith." And this is in Sunnah Abi Dawud. And the hadith that among the 7 whom Allah will shade with his shade on the day when there will be no shade but his, are 2 men who love one another for the sake of Allah, meeting and parting on that basis. As it says in the hadith, on which the scholars have agreed, that Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, 7 people Allah will give them his shade on the day when there will be no shade but the shade of his throne, i.e. on the day of resurrection. And they are a just ruler, a youth who grew up with the worship of Allah, a person whose heart is attached to the mosques, 2 men who love and meet each other and depart from each other for the sake of Allah, a man whom an extremely beautiful woman seduces for illicit relation, but he rejects this offer and says, "I fear Allah," a man who gives in charity and conceals it to such an extent that his left hand does not know what the right hand is given, and a man who remembers Allah in solitude and his eyes become tearful. And this is in Bukhari and Muslim. But still, so many people burn in the rage of revenge, always burning in it, fueling their anger more and more, always scheming and trying to get back or gain an upper hand. They waste themselves in their energies and efforts where they could have prioritized and channelized these efforts for something better. As did our role model, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. See how he was mistreated at times and even abused, but he never took revenge for himself and prioritized the uplift of his ummah and deen of Allah. So with these qualities of shahwat and ghadab, it's all about rising above yourself, above being me, myself and I, and utilizing these quwwats, these strengths in the most productive and most positive manner.